testing.
Okay, so with emphysema, any lung issue, honestly, you're going to do pulmonary function tests, right? It doesn't really matter what lung issue it is. I really don't have a lot to say about that, but what you're going to find, like I already said, I kind of already said this, is that when you have emphysema, the person is going to have an increased total lung capacity. That's like the big thing that really stands out, because you're like, why would somebody have an increased total lung capacity, right? Decreased, sure. I mean, that kind of makes sense, but you know, with diseases, but increased, that's a little weird. So that one kind of stands out a little bit with the total increased lung capacity. Try to figure out if there's anything else on here. Oh, also the person with emphysema, they do tend to have a weight loss, because if you think about it, when I was sitting there puffing and you're using all of those accessory breathing muscles just to breathe, it tends to burn a lot of calories, to be honest. So they tend to burn a lot of calories just by breathing. And so they tend to be, you know, a lot less in weight, where chronic bronchitis, it doesn't seem to matter one way or the other. They're whatever weight they were going to be, probably. Yeah?
Did you go over the nail clubbing?
Clubbing, okay, again, don't necessarily keep clubbing as locked up on one or the other. That's not going to be your big clue, because when fingernails, when they club, they get blunted off. It's kind of like, if you look at somebody's fingernails from the side, they kind of like start shrinking in and getting puffy down here, okay? What's happening is somebody, if their fingernails start clubbing, they've been hypoxic for a very long time, okay? And as we know, that long-term hypoxia, or even short-term hypoxia, blood is going to want to shunt towards the core where it's needed more, and at the expense of the extremities. And finger clubbing, when it kind of like, there's not a lot of oxygen out there, so it kind of slowly, kind of is less. So it's like they started shrinking their fingers almost, although, you know, I'm not sure if that's completely 100% accurate, but it kind of looks like that. So again, if you see that finger clubbing, it's not necessarily, that's not your big clue. It's not necessarily chronic emphysema or chronic bronchitis. It's just somebody's been hypoxic for a pretty long time before that happens. Okay. As far as looking back at that, how this happens, okay, what it really comes down to, there is a slide in there that basically shows your, I'm not going to redraw that whole thing. Basically shows a cigarette at the top. You have that slide in your notes? No? Okay, so you don't have a slide with a cigarette? Oh, that's unfortunate. Maybe I do have to draw that then. Okay. Where's the eraser here? Exactly. Okay. So what's happening here is that if you are going to kind of look at this and you say, okay, you know what? This is my blood vessel over here, and this is cigarette. That's a cigarette right there. That's pretty good, huh? And then you have over here, you have your alveoli. Okay? That's my alveoli at the end of my lungs. Okay? So basically what happens is you've got a couple different mechanisms going on. So if you're talking about tobacco or the nicotine in tobacco, okay? The nicotine in tobacco, obviously it goes into somebody's lungs, and what's going to run into in those lungs are some neutrophils, okay? So if nicotine is going into lungs and then, into the blood, and the blood has neutrophils in it, then these neutrophils are going to be pretty activated because of that nicotine. It kind of activates. Remember, it's part of the white blood system, right? And it kind of activates the neutrophils. But what happens with the neutrophils, as you have more neutrophils, then you have to be able to break those things down eventually, because even part of your immune system, it can't be on go, go, go all the time, right? So we have an enzyme that is going to actually decrease neutrophils, and that is an increase of neutrophil elastase. And the problem with neutrophil elastase being increased is it eats neutrophils, but it's also an elastase. It kind of eats that elastic tissue, okay? And one of the things that it'll do is it'll go in here, this neutrophil elastase, too much of it, and that is what's actually eating away these walls of the alveoli, okay? That make sense? So this is why they say that one of the main reasons for emphysema is cigarette smoking, because of the nicotine going into the blood, increasing the neutrophils, which increase neutrophil elastase, which eats away at the walls of the alveoli. Now, if you think about that, I didn't really say all of the chemicals in cigarettes doing that. Mostly the nicotine that does that, which means that this same thing, what we're starting to see now is the same thing's happening with people that aren't smoking cigarettes, but they're vaping nicotine, and we're starting to see it a lot faster. Okay, we're talking 25, 30-year-olds that have lungs like a 60-year-old, so smoking 3 packs a day for 30 years. That's what we're starting to see pretty fast nowadays because of that little thing. Now, normally when you talk about cigarettes, you're thinking about these free radicals, right? Because cigarettes have about 4,000 different chemicals in them. Most of them are really nasty. In either case though, it creates a lot of free radicals, right? And when you have this free radical damage, you're basically going to have a attack on some other cells that actually are producing something called surfactant. Anybody remember what surfactant does? That's what we just talked about, right? Surfactant is causing the alveoli to have that surface tension so they can pop back open, okay? Well, if you are having a problem and you're basically having the free radicals that are causing this alpha-1 antitryptase, okay, that's antitryptase. Alpha-1 antitryptase is this enzyme that is needed to produce the cells that make surfactant. So maybe I should do this. Free radicals, alpha-1 antitryptase makes this, which makes that. Who can tell me what cells make surfactant? Every once in a while, I run into somebody who can. Remember, what kind of cells make surfactant? Nothing? Nada? Nada? Okay. So it's called type 2 pneumocytes. Okay, does that sound familiar at all? Type 2 pneumocytes? Again, it's kind of a big buzzword, is that type 2 pneumocytes produce surfactant, and surfactant provide the surface tension so that alveoli can pop back open. But if you notice, what happened here is you don't have that, right? You don't have the type 2 pneumocytes, you're not making a surfactant. This actually also increases the neutrophil elastase, so that's another way that it gets increased. And you're gonna end up with the lot less surfactant, and therefore tissue damage from that. And of course, free radicals just damage crap anyway, right? I mean, they just have a direct effect on that. Yeah?
Wait, can you say the relationship between surfactant and the neutrophil elastase again?
It's not so much the relationship between the surfactant and the neutrophil elastase so much as it is that, again, I didn't really go into it a lot, but with the free radicals damaging the alpha-1 antitryptase, then what's happening is there are these antiproteases, another enzyme, and these antiproteases that are supposed to be not breaking down proteins, they get also inactivated, and when that happens, then you don't have so free radicals, let me put this in there a different way. Antiproteases. So the free radicals technically let me do this, that's another step I was gonna get to, but since you asked. The free radicals are inactivating the antiproteases. The antiprotease inactivation is decreasing the alpha-1 antitrypsin. The alpha-1 antitryptase is decreasing the pneumocyte production, which is decreasing surfactant production. So again, it's a lot of biochem in there, you don't necessarily have to know all that. But the net result is there are several different ways we end up with this damage. Some of it's from straight nicotine, some of it's from the chemicals that are causing free radical damage that's going and dealing with the surfactant pathway, and some of them are just straight up damage from free radicals. Okay? In any case, that's what we're having a problem with, is we're having a problem with all of these different things that you end up in the same. So why is this important to understand, that there's also, besides the smoking, besides the pollution causing this, it also brings in, when you start talking about the alpha-1 antitrypsin. There's no case here. I knew there was something weird in my head. Alpha-1 antitrypsin is the what makes the surfactant. Anyway, so with that, it also brings in this other pathway that sometimes people genetically don't have enough alpha-1 antitrypsin. Okay, so there's a genetic issue that people don't have enough alpha-1 antitrypsin, and then they're not making surfactant. If they're not making surfactant, then these lungs tend to collapse a lot. Okay, so sometimes that's a genetic issue that causes this. We still call it, we kind of call it emphysema still, but you know, it's more of just a chronic lung collapsing because they don't have surfactant. Okay, yeah.
Can you supply them with the right enzymes and proteins to make surfactant?
Yes, I don't know that they actually give them the right enzymes. I don't know if our genetic engineers have actually been able to reverse that. Well, you can give somebody surfactant though.
Just like inject that?
Huh?
How do you administer that?
Ow. Never had to do it. I imagine it's done in some kind of ICU. But yeah, you can give somebody surfactant somehow. I don't know. I'm assuming that they breathe it in as a mist or something, but I honestly don't know. You also have sometimes where, if you think about that surfactant, it's one of the last things to actually be made in the human body before birth, because you don't need it, right? I mean, before birth, you're not breathing air, you're breathing fluid, and you're getting, you know, oxygen through the blood from the mother, right? So you don't need it. So this is one of the things that is one of the last things that kind of develop. So when you have babies that are extremely premature, frequently they will have low surfactant levels, which means that they will have the problem of having a collapsed lung. And if that happens, then obviously they spend some time in the NICU, neonatal intensive care unit, until they can build that up. Again, that's one thing I know they do it. I don't know how they do it, but somehow they mature it. Again, if it's just a prematurity issue, eventually they will start making it. If it's a genetic issue, I don't know how they do that though. But in any case, you got that. So the other thing about chronic bronchitis and emphysema that's kind of fairly high yield to know is that you got to compare them next to each other, because honestly, the case studies look pretty similar, whether it's chronic bronchitis or emphysema. You know, they tend to look very similar where they're having chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, right? So how do you tell the difference between the two? Okay, again, one of them, blue bloater, the other one, pink puffer, okay? One of them, you have increased respiratory rate and decreased cardiac output. The other one, you have decreased respiratory rate, but increased cardiac output. Okay, so everything's kind of backwards. They're like literally totally opposites on that. Okay, so I like to remember which one of them has the increased respiratory rate and therefore decreased cardiac output.
Emphysema.
The pink puffer, because when I was doing that, right, that's increased respiratory rate because they have to puff that air. So they have increased respiratory rate, but they have decreased cardiac output, where the chronic bronchitis is the other one. Okay, so that's also something you might want to memorize, I guess, whichever way you want to do it. It's like one's increased, the other one's decreased, and then the other side, the other one's decreased and the other one's increased. If you remember one, you're probably good to go. You can get all of those. Okay. Where are we at? Asthma. Okay, what is asthma? You guys know what asthma is, right? What is asthma, ultimately?
Inflammation of the bronchioles and mucus.
Okay.
Overproduction.
Okay. Why? Why does somebody get these inflamed bronchioles and overproduction of mucus?
Allergic reaction in the lungs.
Okay, allergic reaction is one of the reasons, isn't it? And that kind of makes sense, right? If you're having allergies, you're going to want to fight those allergies. You're going to release histamine. It's going to vasodilate. It's going to cause, when you vasodilate, you spread the pores, right? Things come out of the bloodstream into the lung tissue. You kind of get like some edema of the lungs, right? But you're not vasodilating the bronchioles, you're vasodilating the blood. Exact opposite with the bronchioles, right? It's all constricting. And now you got mucus production and constricting, which looks a lot like the bronchitis kind of stuff anyway, right?